Krystal McCoy did not grow up in a home with domestic abuse. She is not a minority. She does not come from poverty. She is a well-educated woman. He was a claimed Christian man, and she a Christian woman. She was not who she thought of when she thought of a woman in an abusive relationship. But Krystal is a survivor of domestic violence. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It spans and affects different ages, genders, social economic backgrounds, and religions. Today, she shares her story. Krystal is a survivor of domestic violence, not a victim.
Krystal McCoy, thank you so much for joining me here today to share your story with AwareNow. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Absolutely. Let's just get right into it, shall we? And the truth of the matter is that anyone who has been in an abusive relationship has a story to share. Krystal, thank you for sharing yours today. Can we just begin by sharing your journey and experience leading up to and during the domestic violence situation?
Absolutely. So it was a Sunday morning, and I was sitting in church in 2014 as any other Sunday morning. I was with my daughter. I was a single mom at 34 years old, lost, alone, and really feeling broken. And that is when I saw him. I hadn't seen him at church before, and come to find out it was actually his first service. I saw him walk up to the altar with his grandmother, or he wheeled her up there, and prayed over her with other people from the congregation. And I remember just thinking, wow, what a godly man. And it was something that my heart desired, and I thought I had found that person in that moment. So it all kind of moved quickly from there. We did end up exchanging phone numbers, and then he didn't want any waking minute that we weren't working to not be together as our mixed family. And I should have seen that as a red flag, but I didn't. I took that as endearment and a want for me in my brokenness. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's the way it all began.
Yeah.
So how did you then first recognize that you were in an abusive relationship? You said a moment ago you should have seen that as a sign, but what were the early signs or the red flags that were there?
Looking back, the red flags were there very, very soon, early on in the relationship. Just moving so quickly should have been my first red flag. That all waking hours, he wanted isolated with our little family. But I didn't. I took it as endearment, and he was quite the charmer. And then the red flags really turned into the abuse a little bit later on, probably about 3 months into it, where it started as verbal abuse. He started just using these gut-wrenching terms and exclamations to me about, it's not rocket science, Einstein, or just really making me feel stupid. He began to get upset if I did something wrong. Let's say that I gave him the wrong way for directions on the freeway. He would, drive erratically and really play on my fear of car accidents. Or if I didn't have the dining room table cleared off to his liking, then he would friend somebody on social media that was attractive and really play on my fear of infidelity. So that's really when that cycle began. And he would spit out these words and play these games and have this behavior, and then turn it around, and he would cry with me and apologize and say, he can be a better man. It just takes God being in the middle of us, and he, please stick with him. And I did. I stuck with him to the point of saying I do. And it was really in holy matrimony that he had me where he wanted me, per se. that was when the abuse took a significant a significant increase. And it went from being something that was sporadic and just the two of us to now daily and with our daughters in our presence. And that cycle didn't happen anymore. Now there was no tears from him. There was no apology. There was no, please stick with me so I can be a better man. Now there was blame to me for his behaviors are because of what I was doing or not doing.
So what were the factors that finally prompted you, that said, okay, enough is enough, and prompted you to leave the situation?
Okay, so I will go to the beginning of February of 2018. So we had been married since June of 2017. It was a typical morning as any other morning before work and school. And he had called me an effing psycho this particular morning. And my 12-year-old daughter at the time, just out of nowhere, just screamed and said, I am so sick of the way that you talk to my mom. Just shut up. And from that, I realized he's got to go. And so that was the first time that he left. And it didn't take long for that to return. For him to return, it lasted about 2 weeks. And then I found myself in the situation while I was out with my daughter. He called and said, I'm back. I'm laying in the bed now. You don't get to decide that our marriage is over. You are going to make this work. I came home. He gave, heartfelt apologies, truly saying that things were going to change. He was going to go to counseling. I was going to go to counseling as a couple, as a family. And that lasted for 2 days. And then 2 days passed, and this time it was on his terms. He said, we aren't going to work, and just peacefully kissed me on the forehead and left. Fast forward to the wee hours of the morning on Sunday. That was a Saturday. And my phone started buzzing, and it was a text message from his brother that said, he showed up at my doorstep at 3 a.m, and he was intoxicated, and he really is regretful, and you guys need to make this work out. And I was kind of beside myself. He said he was gonna wake his brother up, and make sure that he got ready for church so that he wouldn't let on to any troubles with his daughter. And I said, okay. It was very overwhelming. And next thing I know, I get a message from his brother, another text that says, he's awake and he's not in a good mood. And I was like, that's not good. And before I knew it, his brother only lived 2 blocks away. Before I knew it, he was coming through that front door, speaking vulgar things to me as he walked through on the way to his shower. My mother was there, and he stripped down naked just in front of her, and said that he wasn't going to go to his counseling session that was scheduled for that Monday. And I was like, really? Like the very first one that you were going to have? And I see his phone light up. And so I checked it, and it was a message from somebody, a female, making plans to meet around that same time as the counseling appointment on that Monday. And that's all it took. How dare I look at his phone? He, flung open that shower curtain and stormed after me to the back room, where I was just intended to grab his stuff and get it out. Open the door and just put it out in front of me. And before I knew it, I was shoved from the back and directly into the truck that was in the driveway, and fell to the ground from there. And then he got me his hands around my neck and up to the side of the door, and somehow I was able to drop down from his grip. My mom says she threw a coffee mug at his back. I'm not sure what transpired. I just know that it was enough release for me to drop down and get in the door. We ended up in the back room, and I was now laying on the ground. He had, I believe, hit me onto the ground. I'm not sure. I had a busted lip. And I can still see the look in his eyes that he gave me, and he just like turned and walked away. And I don't know if he had heard the ambulance coming or had heard my mom on the phone or what, but he just walked out. And I remember the next moments were surreal. It was like I was in a Lifetime movie. The cops came in. There was one cop that was questioning me, and then another one questioning him. And next thing I know, I'm in the back of the ambulance. And I'm on my way to the hospital, to the emergency department, the very hospital that at that time I had worked at for 11 years. So you would think that would have been when I left, but you were circling back around to why I left. But that wasn't. Actually, it took a while. It was quite the journey. At that time, the state put a do not contact order on between the two of us, and that lasted for a few months. Then I had like a reality check of the situation, and I didn't want to be divorced. I didn't want another failed marriage. I wanted to make it work. I couldn't fathom the fact that my husband tried to kill me. So I wrote a letter on his behalf asking that the do not contact order be dropped. And I read that at one of the hearings, and I was told by the judge that he wouldn't even entertain that until I took 3 classes at our local women's shelter. And so I took those 3 classes, and he dropped the order, but I continued on with the services through the Safe Center. I continued on with the counseling aspect of it. And by the time sentencing came around, I had stood up on his behalf a few times between the legal system and law enforcement. And when he was sentenced only to 6 months, and the original arrest of attempted murder by strangulation was pled down to aggravated domestic violence. And that's when the abuse began again, even from jail. Like, how does that even happen? But it did. And so I started not being able to do anything right. At this time now, I was sleeping with one of his best friends, which of course I was not. And he had a big window from his cell room at the work release program. And I would come in at nights and change out his cooler for work. So give him new food and fresh drinks and ice and all of that. And one of those times, I had went from my hair being like long and blonde to a shorter brown with bangs haircut. And I remember I went and I was all excited about it. And I went to do his cooler that night, and he stood there, and I remember that look from his window, and he just took his thing, shaking his head, making that scissor motion, and he was not happy. And I received a call from him shortly after about making the changes in my physical appearance. All of that kind of coincided around the time that he got in trouble on work release. And specifics of that are not important, but what happened was that he had to end up doing 6 additional months, and it had to be served at the regular jail. So one of the nights where he had been transferred there to the regular jail, I had spent the day and evening and most of the night at the emergency department with my daughter. And we had to come home, and we were laying in bed. I was going to let her sleep with me, and she just wasn't feeling well. It was a lot. And he called around the same time he would normally call every night. And I said, hey, I was just in the emergency department with Ashley. I'm exhausted. It's going to be a short call. And he became so upset. He informed me that that has nothing to do with him, that she was in the emergency department. It should not take away from our time spent on the phone, and said, well, isn't she in her own bed anyways? And she wasn't. So at that time, I ended the conversation, and I laid there and I reflected, and I couldn't imagine my daughter going through that same pain that I was going through. And now it wasn't about me anymore. It was about her. And I knew that she was going to define love at how I was capturing it in a relationship, and it wasn't good. And that's what finally prompted me to leave.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
All of that detail. It must be difficult sometimes, even now, to go and relive and reflect on those things. Can you share any strategies, any coping mechanisms that helped you, that worked for you, that to deal with the trauma and the aftermath of all of that?
Absolutely. I have a lot of activities that helped me cope with the trauma. I started a journal that very night, and that really has helped me reflect back on the abuse. It helped me steer from going back to it. You know, I would see patterns as I would reflect back on situations, as well as it gave me an opportunity to share that with others, if they needed to, read that they could relate. Music was a huge part of my healing journey. Music is my love language, and Lauren Daigle was on repeat, like 24 hours a day, her Look Up Child album. And I kind of got to go see her last week, and that was super exciting. But music was a big thing. Prayer for me was a big thing. And reading. Knowledge is power in general, but not only does it give you so much power in learning about what domestic violence is and other stories, but then you have that relation to them, and it really helps you realize that you're not alone. And since that assault, I am just blown away by how many of our stories, our survivor stories, are so different, but so much the same. I mean, just patterns of behavior and things that we will say or thoughts that we had. And it's just a really good way to reflect on that. My biggest strategy as far as how to heal and recover from this is to set boundaries and stick with them. Setting boundaries helps you recognize the fact that whatever it is brings you pain. By creating those boundaries, you are letting others know what you will not tolerate in the future. And it's a healthy way to teach people how to treat you, really, by what you tolerate. So I would say definitely have a strategy of setting some boundaries right off the bat.
That's so smart too. Just exactly how you said, to teach through your tolerance, right? Like, you're just setting the level, so you're teaching people this is how you will or will not treat me by the boundaries that you set. And to your point, respecting those, honoring those. So as a survivor of domestic violence yourself, as an advocate of support for other survivors, I'm curious to know, Krystal, what misconceptions or stereotypes about domestic violence have you come across?
Okay. I would say probably the two biggest stereotypes that I've come across. The first one would be that it discriminates. Domestic violence discriminates. That is so far from the truth. It spans from different ages to genders to religions to economic backgrounds. I mean, I thought of myself as a well-educated, middle-class, white, Christian woman. I was not who I previously thought of when I thought of somebody in a domestic violence relationship. So that first one, it would be that domestic violence discriminates, because it does not. And then my second one would be that it's easy to leave, And although nobody's ever said to me, like, hey, it's just easy, just leave, they insinuate that by the question, well, why didn't you just leave? Or why doesn't she just leave? Or why don't they just leave? And by that question, it insinuates that it's easy. And there are so many factors that go into why somebody doesn't leave. That could be a whole discussion in itself, but some of the major ones that I've encountered, either personally or with other survivors, is financial reasons. A lot of times that isolation that they have had includes from employment. So there's that aspect. There is the fear of losing custody. A lot of times they will, because they don't have an income, they will threaten the children, or even the children's safety if it's split custody in the times that you don't have them. And then probably the biggest part of that of why she doesn't just leave is because of their safety. It's actually much less safe to leave than it is to stay in it. 75, I believe it's 75 approximately % of women that are murdered by their assailant are murdered after they take that step to leave. So it's actually much easier to stay and safer.
75%.
Yeah, approximately 75% of women that are murdered by their abuser are murdered after they attempt to leave, take that step.
Wow. So that just gives you a whole different perspective, a whole different look at that.
Yeah.
So while people often mean well, they don't always do well. So Krystal, my next question is this: how can society, friends, family, and professionals better support survivors of domestic violence? How can we do a better job?
I love this question. This is probably my favorite question. Community response is so important. It's so essential. I have a few different things that I recommend to show your support. And the first one is believe them, because they fear that you doubt them. They fear that doubt. It was hard for me to speak to our pastor and his wife about a man who was so instrumental in our men's ministry, who they had less than a year earlier stood up and wed us. Would they even believe me? And they did. Assuring these survivors that abuse is not tolerable. Not only was I worried about what my pastor and wife would say, but people in general. I mean, would they have me bound to these vows that I took less than a year ago? But they didn't. They said abuse is not tolerable. Make them feel safe. Safety is a huge part of their fear during that process when leaving. Like I said, it increases their risk of being harmed, and help them out by making them feel safe. The paramedics were trained in how to treat me medically while providing comfort. The emergency room staff was able to communicate to me that I was safe. The church I went to took measures during services to make sure that I was safe. The public safety officers at my work would walk me to and from my car to make me feel I was safe. I felt protected. Support them. members of my congregation, my friends, would share their domestic violence experiences with me. They would attend court hearings with me. They would reach out and pray for me or send me a song. So just really supporting them, be their voice when they are voiceless. I kind of stand on this, which is speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, ensure justice for when they are crushed. That is Proverbs 31, 8 through 9. And the judge mandating me to seek services at the Safe Center is another way that he was the voice for me when I was voiceless and wasn't able to meet that need on my own. So it's crucial in them finding help and hope. So without that support of the community doing all of those things, believing me, letting me know it's not tolerable, making me feel safe, supporting me, and being my voice, I don't know where I would be right now. I mean, I may be still telling stories, writing chapters in my book of marriage, or I might not even be here to tell my story. So, it's definitely important.
Absolutely. So support, it's not just like a one way to do it. There's lots of different ways to provide support, and that are all needed. So you are a board member of the Safe Center.
Yes.
Krystal, please share what the organization does they do a lot of things: prevent, educate, empower, advocate. Just fill us in.
Absolutely. Another question that I love to I would say brag about the Safe Center, for lack of a better term, but they are my hope when I was hopeless, and I owe everything to them. So they, to start with, they offer a 24/7 emergency line that you can call, that they provide support for sexual assault and domestic violence. They have emergent safe housing. They provide meals, personal hygiene items, counseling, connect you with legal assistance. They're always out in the community providing education on the services they provide, educating survivors about what domestic violence and sexual violence look like. They're empowering the community to raise their own voices by having events like vigils. We have one for each county, Clinton and Shiawassee, coming up in Domestic Violence Awareness Month. They do so much. I mean, even so much more than just that. Yeah.
Well, and so what's interesting, I noticed too, because I was looking through the website, and little things that you notice that you don't see on other sites, like press here to exit, or these kinds of things that you don't think about. But for someone who's going and looking for help and looking for a resource they can go to where they can find safety, it's just that, to me, just seeing that verbiage on there was such because I imagine there are so many people who want to ask for help but are scared to, because they're scared that they'll be caught asking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they really, it's very confidential. It's definitely very confidential services that they provide. Being in a small community, that's extra important to make sure that confidentiality is kept. And all of their services are free. That's another one. I had mentioned that finance is a barrier for a lot of survivors, and that doesn't have to be one of them for their services at Safe Center, because they're free.
So you, Krystal, are not a victim of domestic violence. You are a survivor of it. I think that verbiage is really important and very empowering. How has the abuse that you endured, how did it ultimately make you stronger?
It strengthened my faith by learning to be obedient. And I know that probably sounds strange, but when I was in the emergency department on that gurney, I cried out, literally, why God? And I very clearly heard to be a voice for others. And at that time, I didn't understand it. I didn't accept it. I didn't act on it. what that has grown to look like now is a few months into survivorship, I cried out that question again, laying in bed one night, and I heard that same response. So I sat up in bed and researched domestic violence public speakers, and became involved with the Survivor Speaking Bureau, began work with the Safe Center on the board, the very organization that gave so much to me, giving back. I, reached out to other survivors and have helped them on their journey. And all of those times, I would be lying if I said that any of this was easy. Every time that I share my testimony, I shake. Like my legs right now are shaking. My voice shakes a lot. I get triggered sometimes leading up to it. I will have nightmares. Sometimes afterwards, I'll have nightmares. Those for over a year were nightly. Now it's just when I raise my voice. But all of those times, especially early on, I questioned using my voice. I questioned speaking out. And because I have consistently been obedient to that, I have seen the fruit that it's bared, and those that it has helped, even if just one person it helped. And I've learned just to trust God, like that this may not be what I want to be doing right this minute, but this is what He wants me to be doing. And so here I am. So being a survivor definitely made my faith stronger.
And as a result has made so many other people stronger.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely sure of that. One more question for you today, Krystal, is what advice would you give to someone who is currently in an abusive relationship or who's struggling to leave one? What advice would you give if there was one piece that you could give?
Seek out your local domestic violence shelter. The local services I sought out were instrumental in my journey. They provided me with that support, that education, the services that helped me heal. They let me reflect on the fact that I was even in a abusive relationship. They helped me establish that safety plan so that when I did leave, I was doing so in the safest manner. They helped me deal with grief through counseling. Please, if you are a survivor, and a survivor is even up to the second of enduring it, take advantage of the resources that are available. They are your hope healer. You are worthy of their assistance, and you are not alone.
The biggest thing, I think, what you just said, you are not alone. And to anyone and everyone who watches this, who tunes into this conversation, to know that you are here with them, that there are a number of survivors who will say that you are worthy, you are not alone, and thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for helping all of us to become a bit more aware now. Thank you.
Thank you.